the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, hello. Welcome back to Chase Thomas Podcast, taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. We've got Cousin Shane of that SEC podcast here. What a great setup. You got the lights behind you. You got that SEC podcast logo. Is that who are the men behind you?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. We got Lane Kiffin on one side and Monty Kiffin on the other. So
there you go.
My grandfather actually collected those at the Smoky Stadiums when they would hand those out. And I've got some that I'm hiding that you can't see. You know, your Buzz Petersons and I think Butch Jones is floating around here somewhere. Okay. But yeah, I threw these up, you know, especially after Monty passing. I felt like that would be the right move.
I love that. And he was a great dude. And
did you ever meet him?
I mean, my friend of the pod, Ryan Shumpert, did such a great job with his, I don't know if you read the oral history on the Lane Kiffin era at Tennessee on Rocky Top Insider from a month ago, I guess now, but it was so good. And you come away, Monty, just a great dude and great defensive mind. I would have loved to have Monty Kiffin calling Tennessee defenses for a while. That would have been fun.
Yeah. No, it felt like, man, I mean, it felt like we had something special back then too, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, even though we lost that Alabama game, you know, that Cody jumped up and got that block. It just, I felt like there were some special years ahead for the Tennessee Vols. And honestly, that probably crushed me one of the most is when Kiffin, you know, up and left and went to Southern Cal. You know, that one stuck. So it took me a long time to get him out here. And if it weren't for his dad, I'd still have it in the box over there in the corner.
I love that. Who is your favorite Tennessee coach? Is it obviously Philip Fulmer, or do you have a different one?
Well, you know, it's funny. I grew up a big Johnny Majors fan. And when you were younger, because that's back my time, I'm 42 years old, and Johnny Majors was my favorite coach because he was my grandfather's favorite coach. And he's the one that introduced me to football and took me to the orange and white games and you know, just kind of made it special for me. And I remember, you know, Heath Schuler back in the day, that was one of my favorite quarterbacks, but there was something special about Phil Fulmer. My grandfather never forgave him. I think even after that 98 championship, he finally came around. But honestly, I went to a Philip Fulmer offensive line camp, and I was sold when I met him for the first time. There was a real reason that I knew that Phil Fulmer was special with recruiting. He just made you feel welcome whenever you got to meet him. And so Fulmer moved up my list, but, you know, Josh Heupel's moving up there pretty quick right now.
I mean, right there. He's actually right with Fulmer in terms of win percentage to this point in his career. The thing is, though, he's got a long way to go. You look at the years. Fulmer was winning at a little bit better clip than Heupel has to this point, but it was over just a crazy amount of time where you just look at the years and it's just maybe Heupel's here that long, but the modern college football climate, I don't know if Heupel will be around long enough to catch Fulmer or to win at that clip that long.
And don't get me wrong, I was one of the ones that was ready for a new change when Fulmer is a tail end of his career. You know, I was, you know, you watch a Steve Spurrier offense and you're like, oh, why can't we have that with all the recruiting that we're able to do with the facility? Back then it was a facilities race and it felt like we were right there neck and neck with the best. And I didn't quite understand why we couldn't be as exciting as some of these other teams that were starting to hit in the early 2000s. So, but you know how it works. The decade, I think, was it Mark had that book, Decade of Dysfunction or whatever. It's you don't realize how good you have it until it's gone. And I look at some of these other teams around the SEC and I say the same, like Coach Kelly. You look at Brian Kelly down at LSU. They're upset. Like last year was a disappointment. A 9-win season was a disappointment. You know, you pair that with a 10 and 11 win season prior to that. It's like, man, it could be worse, guys. Don't look at Florida. They still haven't got, you know, above par, if you will. So I'm very grateful for what Josh Heupel has brought to Tennessee, and the consistency is harder than ever. And the fact that he's in a college football playoff year 3, year 4, whatever it is, I feel like that's a win. That's a feather in our cap, and I'd like for him to stick around for a long, long time.
Yeah, we'll see. I think this is this is a big year for Heupel. I think year 5 for him, it's really interesting because I think in a lot of ways it's kind of a fork in the road situation because Heupel doubled down on the offensive staff. Like, he did not make any changes. He was like, we're going to get it right. Joey Halsley staying as QB coach, Darrell Sims still at RB coach, Kelsey Pope still wide receiver coach, Alec Ablin still tight ends coach, Glenn Ellerby still offensive line coach. And he's betting on his in-house guys. Like, there's not even like a new co-OC. There's not a new big-time analyst coming in. Like, he is betting on things getting just remedied naturally in-house. Yeah. He's betting on the retention of his guys because they've only added a handful of guys from the portal, 0 receivers, even with the mass exodus at wide receiver in the winter cycle. I think because you've invested so much in Nico coming in to have the kind of year that he had last year, it wasn't bad. And winning 10 games as a first-year starter is a big deal. He was, I would say he was good from the second half of the Alabama game on. But this was still an offense that was shut out for a month straight in the first half. This was still an offense that was 94th in passing in conference play nationally last year. It's an offense that has not been good outside of running the football the last 2 years. So now you have half of the Heupel tenure with some, I would say, less than ideal circumstances at offense where you're having to live in 12 personnel this past year because your tackles can't block. So you're just like, we're running up the middle and we're making Dylan Sampson our Ron Dane and we're running like 2005 Wisconsin style football to make the CFP. But on the flip side, I give Heupel credit for pivoting. Like, a lot of coaches are stubborn about that. Like, you covered the SEC as a whole, Shane. You've seen so many years of coaches who are so steadfast in their belief that their system will get over this.
Jimbo Fisher's a prime example. You know?
Exactly. And Heupel adjusted. He was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. We're going to lean on our defense, which was top 10 in scoring defense this past year, and I'm going to lead on my elite tailback in Dylan Sampson, and we'll see how far this takes us. And, I mean, it took him to the CFP, so I think he deserves credit in that regard. But I also think this fan base and what you were talking about, like those fireworks, people can't forget the 2022 season. People can't forget that number 1 scoring offense. People can't forget that you've invested a lot of money in quarterbacks and you're stacking blue chip quarterback after blue chip quarterback. And at a certain point, like the passing game, the vertical passing game has to return, or I don't know what, like, I don't know. I just think he will not be able to sell running it back with everybody in 26 if the passing game doesn't have to be as dominant as it was in 22 with Hyatt and company. Yeah. But you need to find a middle ground to what it was. You have to have new wrinkles. You have to make sure that it's showing significant signs of life, or then, like, what did you get out of the Nico experience? Because the first year was the Dylan Sampson show. And if this year he's not on pace for a Heisman type year, then you're like, wow, okay. Then he's gone, and then you're like, what was that? Like, there was so much hype, and it was just, it was fine. Like, you'll probably win a lot of games, but you're like, it wasn't the most exciting.
I think that's the problem is we have a short-term memory, and we remember how special 22 was. And I mean, you think about some of the greatest football games, multiple ones of those that come to mind came from that year alone. I mean, it was special. And then when you see a defense take the step forward like they did last year, and you can't help but think, man, if we had the offense at 22, there's no way we would not be hoisting a national championship trophy at the end of the year. And why are we not there? We've got the coaching staff returning. You said it. We've got the continuity there. We got a lot of pieces back on the defense. We got, I felt like last year this was going to, I mean, that's what we kept saying. We made excuses for Joe Milton. Like, you know what? I get it, and Heupel too. I get it. Don't want to burn a red shirt, yada, yada, yada. We're going to keep him. The Nico will be released next year. We got a little teaser with the Iowa game, and we got all excited. And then it kind of sputtered, man. I mean, after the NC State game, it just felt like we never had anything to work with downfield. And, ultimately, you could blame the staff. You could blame players. I see a lot of people blame, the wide receivers and, but, again, ultimately it comes down to the captain. And as the painted picture I gave you earlier, there's still expectations now when you go year after year, 10 wins, 11 wins. We're flirting. We're talking like this is when the details matter. This is when the players matter. And you can't go through a damn NIL transfer portal and not walk away with at least one or two guys that are key contributors, it seems like, and fix the problems that we were having. Because then it makes me think, well, maybe it's not the receivers, So I don't know, man. I get the frustration side of a Vol fan because we want it now. Yeah. And we don't want to keep referring to 90. We don't want to be the next Georgia that talks about a natty for 40 years. We want to be the team that is always competing for it. And it feels like we're close. We're close enough to make a difference and not get embarrassed like we did with Ohio State.
Yeah, I think they're high floor. Like Heupel is a high floor guy at Tennessee. And I think this season, like I still look at it, I'm like, probably worst case it's 8-4, but I would say probably most realistic worst case is 9-3.
Yeah.
But he has to win one of 3 games he's never won before as the head coach at Tennessee, which is either beat Georgia or win on the road at Tuscaloosa or Gainesville. If he doesn't do one of those 3, Tennessee's not going to the CFP in 2025.
You don't think so? You don't think so?
I don't think 9-3 gets you in now.
9-3. I got you.
Yeah.
10-2, you're in.
10-2, you're in. Yeah. But to get 10-2, that means you have to win one of those games that Heupel's never won at Tennessee. So I don't know. Maybe this year he can do it. You get Florida in November. I think that could potentially be a big thing for them because there's some weird Florida optimism where people are really like driving this in, and I'm like, I think people just like, I'm seeing some of this national stuff, and I feel like a homer sometimes where I'm seeing this and I'm like, Tennessee got to the CFP with for most of the conference play was a bad offense. Like they made it with underachieving with this offense and still made it to the CFP. If their offense is even halfway better vertically in 25, like I think they can get to 10-2 with relative ease again. But people who are putting Auburn or Florida or South Carolina ahead of Tennessee right now, I'm like, y'all, this defense, they're returning. Like I understand they're gonna lose Pierce, but like Joshua Joseph's in year 4, I think will be just fine. Him, Caleb Herring, Jordan Ross, they've got dudes. The linebacker play I think will be better. They're only gonna be playing blue chippers there. You have the best cornerback tandem in Tennessee at Tennessee since Jabari Greer in the early 2000s. Like Dramad and Ricky Gibson are the best at Tennessee. Boo Carter in year 2. The defense is gonna be really good. Like I don't see the defense falling off at all in 25. So I'm like, I just feel like 9-3 is the floor for this team again. And I see these other, like, people are talking themselves into the other teams, and I don't know, Shane, are we homers for just not seeing it? Because I feel like people don't want to put Tennessee in the CFP again.
They're definitely not getting the respect they deserve. I mean, you got to remember, not too many teams made the playoffs last year. Tennessee was one of them, and honestly should have hosted that playoff game against Ohio State. And who knows, if we didn't get a face mask, maybe we would have won that game. I don't know. That's the optimism homer in me. But I will say this. We do this during talking season. We do it every year. We paint a picture of why this team's better than that team. South Carolina may have a better team, but their schedule is one of the toughest in the league. Auburn will show improvement, I believe, this year. Of course, I say that every year with Hugh Freeze down there. So Mike absolutely hates Hugh Freeze. And I just feel like, I don't know. I mean, you talk about somebody being aggressive in the portal. They were one of those teams, and that's why we're talking about them. So Florida will be improved. And, if I'm looking at Tennessee's schedule, this is your optimism. You talked about the toughest games. That's Georgia at home. That's Bama on the road. I think that's the toughest. Yeah. But you still got the Swamp that you got to go to late in the year. You still got Arkansas, which, they got your number last season. So there's still some landmines that are laying around on that schedule. But if you were just doing schedules hardest to easiest, Tennessee really lucked out on this draw here. And you're right. If we've got some improvement on the offense, we keep the continuity and the aggressiveness on the defense, I think we're still right there in the same boat of taking one of those 12 spots at the end of the year.
My gut is the Florida game in November is a playing game for Tennessee.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. That's Lane Kiffin. Yeah. I mean, the Florida Gators are and they're hot right now. Yeah. I think it's kind of a joke, but they got the longest winning streak right now in the SEC because they finished the season strong. But again, very daunting schedule next year for the Florida Gators. And what does it look like by the time they roll in, Tennessee rolls in down there? And just following the Vols. You know, we just did a podcast yesterday, Fear of the Logo. And basically when you see a logo, what's your knee-jerk reaction? Like if you see it on a schedule 4 years from now, we always have that moment where we're saying, well, that's a win or that's a loss or toss or something like that. And the Florida Gators will always be a toss, in my opinion, because the 90s. I mean, that's the reason I don't got any hair, man. Them damn Florida Gators have taken it all away from me, because there's plenty of games that we should have won, we could have won, and we didn't win. And I worry because, hell, last year, Florida blew that game. If you ask me, they blew it in Knoxville. Billy Napier just kind of screwed up there at the end. And the year before, I had lost a bet and I had to walk 13 miles because some reason Tennessee lost to the Florida Gators and they shouldn't have. So that's the Gators for you. And so you can never take your foot off the gas here in the SEC. But I'm telling you right now, there's reason for optimism if you're a Vol fan. Because you do have, I think, some of the pivotal pieces. You got a returning quarterback, the continuity. You may not like the coaching. Who cares? You know, it's the same system. It's the same guys. So the expectations will always be the same. I think that's important. There's some new coaches out here trying to break in programs. You're going to watch. They're going to fumble right out of the gate. Tennessee can't afford to do that. And then you pair that with a really good defense. That's kind of erasing some of the mistakes you make on offense. Hopefully we take some more chances. I'd love to see some more chances. I called him low T Heupel. At times it felt like we were just afraid to be aggressive. I want to be a little bit more aggressive, and I think we can afford that because of our defense.
I think that's fair. A lot of it will just be like Lance Hurd's got to be a lot better at left tackle. Part of last year is just like I was talking about at the top of like the 12 personnel stuff. It's just that Tennessee could not protect. Like you saw in the Oklahoma game, Tennessee was just basically like, we got to get out of here. And Larry Johnson's in there. You were in your backup tackles and you're just like, survive in advance. Like, let's just get out of here and go home. But then you're like, oh, this is just going to be the rest of the season because the tackles aren't going to be able to protect Nico. Nico was running for his life for the majority of conference play. And you couldn't really get a good, fair read on him because he's a 19-year-old kid who is running for his life in the toughest conference in the sport, week in, week out. His receivers, when they are open, they're dropping balls. And then when they're, sometimes they are open and Nico doesn't see him in time, so Nico misses. And then there are some times where it's the protection breaks down and Nico gets sacked or running for his life, whatever. But I do think David Sanders at right tackle as a plug-and-play guy, my gut is that raises the floor for Tennessee's offensive line because they don't even need elite tackle play to survive. Like they were playing Gerald Mincey, J.J. Crawford on the left-hand side of the Alabama game, and it was fine. Like they were able to stop some NFL first-round edge guys against Alabama. If the tempo is rolling, doesn't matter. What they need is just solid. They need just okay. Like you need B+ B play at tackle at Tennessee under Heupel to make this work. And I think as a true freshman with the amount of talent that Sanders has, I think he can solidify that from where they were last year with Campbell and Dane Davis rotating. But I also think people are going to talk all offseason about Tennessee. Shane is just like, oh, how did they replace Dylan Sampson? And I wrote about this today. The player that they're going to miss the most is not Sampson. It's Dante Thornton. Dante Thornton led all of American FBS receivers in yards per catch at 25.4 this past year. You go through the games, the losses for Tennessee, guess who's absent? He has like 2 catches in the 3 losses for Tennessee. 0 catches in the Georgia game. 1 catch for 14 yards against Ohio State. He brings you back in the Vanderbilt game. He has 3 catches, 2 touchdowns. Like he had like a souped up Javonte Payton year last year. Dante Thornton was your lone game wrecker. Like you give him the ball, he is going to do something good. He doesn't need a bunch of catches. I would love to have him for 1 more year because at least that gives me somebody else I know on the outside to take some of the pressure off Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley and these super talented young kids. But at least you have one safety valve you know is a chunk play guy. Now you're going to have to bet on Chris Brazzell having that same Dante Thornton year 2 jump. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but the difference when people are comparing the two is that you remember 2 years ago down the stretch, Dante Thornton, what he got hurt on was a touchdown play. Like it was a bomb against Mizzou where he reels it and he had moved to the outside and was showing flashes that he was a lot more comfortable there. Like he was trending up. Chris Brazzell has been trending down basically from the Alabama game on.
Yeah.
Like that, it wasn't like we're going in the offseason. We're like, Chris Brazzell, like I've never been more ready to buy Chris Brazzell stock going in 25. So I don't know. I'm more mixed on whether or not he's going to be able to make a year.
I was in on the Brad. All I needed was a couple of YouTube clips in spring, and I was. He
hooked. Looks like a great fit. He should be good here. He's huge. He's long. He's 6'5".
Again, I go back to it. It just so many wide receivers in this portal, and it doesn't have to be like the ones like I felt
Give
like
me Dan Key.
Like
how is Dan Key not a Tennessee Volunteer?
Oh my gosh, I would love Barry and Brown, man, down here. I don't understand how we whiffed on all of that. Because there was some damn playmakers moving around, and I felt like Tennessee could have been one of those guys that scooped up at least one.
You just needed one
or two, yeah.
And you didn't need an A+. You didn't need to go get a Carnell Tate or a big namer. You needed someone solid, just someone reliable who has an older player, because Chris Brazzell's your only upperclassman receiver.
What's a kid at Mizzou that went from Mississippi State? You probably got his name.
Oh, Kevin Coleman?
Yeah, I would have loved a Kevin Coleman or something. But we didn't. So we gotta pivot. And honestly, I hope that there's just improvement in the quarterback room as well. You know, I'm not saying it was all on Nico, but you know, I felt like there was a little bit of a pullback later in the season. Kind of like what you said. Maybe it was the Thornton, situation, or maybe it was just lack of confidence in the other guys. And why wouldn't there be? I mean, there was a lot of times that how many times did you watch a drop and you're just like, golly, if we had somebody just catch the damn ball.
The Kentucky game, he had 4 TDs and 400 yards passing if they don't have 2 key drops. Nimrod had one, and I think Brazzell had the other one in that game. But those were both touchdowns.
Maybe a hard reset's what we needed too. Yeah. So, them boys better be on the jugs machine like 24/7. That's what I got to say. Because if I see one damn drop, I'm going to lose my, I don't know if I'm supposed to cuss on here, but sorry. I get carried away.
I love it. But it also makes it fun because I don't know. Like when I get asked about this, I'm like, I don't know. Like I genuinely have never been more uncertain about what a Tennessee offense is going to look like in the Heupel era than going into this year. You could tell,
It's not it's not that. It's we know what we want.
Yeah.
We want the 22. We want I feel like, Nico's not Hendon Hooker, but he has enough attributes to be as efficient as him. And I think that's the problem is we know what we want now and we're not getting it.
Well, you've seen like the best version, right? Like that's like one of those the scariest part is like, do we see the best version of the Heupel offense already?
Oh, I hope not. I hope we didn't peak. You know what I'm saying?
That's the biggest worry.
Peak
that's
in
what's
high
looming.
School, yeah. Oh God, that sucked. I can't go through another coach search. I can't. And I don't like being too negative because face it, Josh Heupel's a hot name at the end of the year for a reason. There's other teams that would love, and I mean, look at Oklahoma. You got Coach Venables over here with a brand new offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, new quarterback. I mean, they're breaking in everything, and I feel like it's a make or break season. And if that job comes open and we're pissed off at a 9-win season because we didn't make the playoffs, man, don't think that. I'm not saying that would happen, but. Again, I go back to the former days. Don't forget what you got right now because it's been bad. We've had some bad years, man.
Oh, that's very fair. Favorite new Vol to watch next season for you is who? Cousin Shane. Boo. Who are you most excited about?
Boo on offense. I want to see
Boo on offense.
Hell yeah, man. I felt like. Obviously, that was a big reason for him sticking around. You're going to see more of this dual threat, and obviously he's got a lot of speed. And I don't know, man. There's just something about just how tenacious he is on defense. I would imagine that aggressiveness on offense as well. There's no way you're going to get him down on the first hit. He's going to be one of those guys that's just going to scratch, claw, because he's going to prove to you that he belongs on that side of the ball as well. So, yeah, I like seeing little Boo run around.
Let me pose this to you.
And David Sanders, I will say that. I saw him at an On3 event in Nashville, and that's a grown-ass man. That is a big boy. That is I can't believe when I saw him that he's lining up against some poor sucker in high school, and they got to block him it's just is unbelievable how big that guy is, and he's grown since that event. So that's another one. He's not going to get it immediately, but I do think he learns quicker. And these kids are trained different now. It's not like when I was in high school and you have to 2 years develop on the offensive line. You're seeing more and more big boys stepping in and immediately making a difference. So that's another one I'd say I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, it was kind of like when you see, I imagine your experience with Sanders was like how it was for me when I saw Walter Nolan up close at Powell a couple of years ago, where they're lining up at fullback, like on goal line situations. And Walter Nolan's just so much bigger than every other high school kid. It just looks ridiculous. Like he looks ridiculous around all these kids. Like he's just huge.
I saw when I was in high school, Jason Witten.
Oh, yeah.
We did a spring game against him, and back then they had the old shoulder pads that are like them Will Bartholomew's,
Yeah.
And I looked at him. I was like, golly, I hope I ain't blocking his ass. Man.
Well, let me ask you this, Shane, because this is something I've been thinking about this offseason too, and it's something I'm sure the staff has thought about. But Boo, I think you're right on the money in terms of what makes Boo special. And you saw it on punt returns down the stretch last year. Like, it was coaching malfeasance that he was not the punt returner from day one. Because, he almost went for 6 in the Georgia game. The punter, Thorson, was the lone person to stop him. His first step is so good. He's so hard to tackle. He's got such natural wiggle. He is, he is the best guy to have at the ball. It's kind of like Reggie Bushy a little bit, where the way he moves is just different. Like, a lot of these guys do not have that first step. And it makes me wonder, like, the star position is important in the Tennessee defense. But is there, because you have so much uncertainty at receiver in 25, and because you really struggled in that room in 24, are we sure he shouldn't just be playing 60 snaps at slot? Like, we're overthinking this, and that his best position and more valuable place at Tennessee? Like, if you can get Jordan Thomas or Christian Charles and get like B+, B- play at star, would you take that and then maybe A+ slot play of Boo and having someone who can really help Nico for a lot of snap? Like, I've thought a lot about that this offseason, but I don't have a good answer. What about you?
I think you're onto something, and I see it. Not just with Tennessee, but I see it with other schools. I think the problem that you run into with a lot of these kids is they're really good or really bad at practice. And if you're having a bad practice or you're not picking it up, the coaches are a little bit more reluctant to let you try something different, to put more on your plate. And I feel like Boo, especially, if given the opportunity, you want him to do so well that he can't afford to put you back on that side of the football. So that's why I was saying early in the season, if you're doing any of these fantasy football leagues or something like that, that's one I would invest in early, because every touch is going to be special until he either proves that he belongs over there or the coaches find out that, hey, let's just keep the boy on defense. So I sometimes you're good at practice, sometimes you're bad at practice, but when the lights come on, that's ultimately what matters the most.
I saw him at Bradley Central before he's just a do-it-all kid. Like, he's just a different playmaker.
And I think that's another thing. Even punt returning, when we got the Berry brothers, we've got Cordero Patterson. Even though we sucked at football, I almost couldn't wait for them to kick it off to Cordero Patterson just to see if he could return it for a touchdown. I remember that Mississippi State game or the Georgia when he did the reverse. Every time he got the football in his hand, he made something special happen. And I hate that it felt like we wasted him, because Cordero Patterson would be great on this Tennessee football team in 25 for sure.
Oh, 100%. He'd be a lot of fun. Which position group are you most confident in next season for Tennessee as it stands right now? Which one are you most confident is going to be a really good unit?
Most confident? It's hard not to say defensive front. But you made mention of the cornerbacks. I feel like the secondary will naturally take a step forward just because the continuity that they have. So the easy answer would be the defense, but I guess the tricky one for me, and maybe it goes along with your article, will be the running backs. Because I'm not necessarily saying Thornton was better, but I do say this, that the way that Josh Heupel runs this offense, it's almost foolproof for whoever's running the football back there. And I feel like that room will be fine no matter who has the ball.
I am right there with you. In the 4 years of Heupel, Tennessee, I even have this, the clear eyes, full hearts don't lose. Friday Night Lights. Like I had what did I write? I did a spinoff for the Heupel running game version of just basically wide splits, light boxes, run forever. Like that's just kind of what Tennessee football is under Heupel, where I just think the way defenses play them, you're always going to be able to run the ball well. Like so in the 4 years, they're averaging between 4.9 yards or 5.5 yards per carry as a team. There's no drop off. Like it's almost consistent. And I would even argue, I mean, we were both in the building for Jalen Wright's big time run to open the Georgia game. Jalen Wright averaged 7.5 yards per attempt 2 years ago. He was more of I think the ultimate Heupel system running back because he actually scared defenses. And what I mean by that is Samson's best trait was that he was so durable and was so good at just getting you 3 to 4 to 5 and not breaking down as the game went on. Like Samson was just third, fourth quarter, this is when I'm more amped up and I'm going to I don't care. You can try and take me down. I'm getting 6 yards out of this. Yeah. But you didn't worry about Samson breaking 1 for 80. Jalen Wright legitimately scared you. Jalen Wright had track speed. Jalen Wright was so good when he got to that second level that it scared opposing defenses. And I think he's been the best upside back of anyone in the Heupel era. But I just think Peyton Lewis, they're going to be back to the rotation this year. Peyton Lewis, Star Thomas, and why am I blanking? Deshaun Bishop, they're going to be fine. It's not going to be as, I guess, fun because you're not going to have a 22 touchdown, 1,500 yard tailback, which is, it's really fun when you have that kind of back. But it's also Tennessee's best season was a trio of Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson, and Jalen Wright in 22, and they were just fine. And it's okay.
It felt kind of like the Mike Leach quarterback situation. No matter who he has back there, statistically, he's going to lead the country in something. Yeah. So I feel like in this Josh Heupel era, you're always going to have 1 or 2 running backs toward the top of the SEC, especially in yards per carry, because there's a lot of openings up front.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Final thing here, Shane. Way too early game that you are most curious about. Which one have you already circled that you're just, when you're looking at the schedule right now, what are you most curious about for Tennessee in 25?
Well, this sounds stupid, but I'm old. 1998 started with one particular football team.
Syracuse.
That's right. And a lot of people forgot Donovan McNabb and how that one came down to the wire. And we almost lost that football game. If we did, we never would have went to a BCS championship game. So the Syracuse one, I think, will be a good test. This is a really good coached football team. I do not think that Tennessee will be underdogs, but I do think that it will give us, and maybe it's just the homer in me, can't wait for the first game of the year type situation. So if I'm not looking at that one, I'm looking at the Florida Gator game later in the year, because I do think the Florida Gators have improved. I think they'll have a better football team. It'll be at the Swamp. And like you, I feel like that could be the game that decides if they go to the big dance or not.
And I think that helps Tennessee, because I think that kind of pressure of they really learn from the South Carolina just bomb that we'll never have a good answer on what happened there with Jeremy Banks and everything. We'll never know for sure what happened.
We know.
Well, we know. I'm just saying in terms of the implosion defensively, everything, where it's just even without Jerry Banks, that kind of implosion just cannot happen in that spot. Where it's just touchdown after touchdown after touch, and you're just we're not getting a stop here. This game's over. And I just look at where they were last year, because that Vanderbilt game, I don't know how you felt. When Vanderbilt goes up 14-0, that opening kick 6, where I remember I was traveling back from Thanksgiving back to Atlanta, and my wife's trying to sleep in the passenger seat because we had really bad traffic on the way up. So I thought I timed it right just to get right back in front of the TV when kickoff started, and traffic. So I'm having to listen on the radio to Hubs and Kessling and Company, and I'm like, I got the phone like next to me and seeing some like update, and I'm like losing my mind. And I was like, what's happening? And she's like, aren't we playing Vanderbilt? And it's like one of those where I'm like, this is my heart was just racing because it was bad, where I was like, they're not going to do this again. They cannot do this 2 out of the last 3 years. You cannot lay this at, because Vanderbilt will never let Tennessee live this down. If they had not recovered, and that was all Dante Thornton, who got that thing with the 86-yard touchdown reception where he gets them back in the game.
Yeah. That
would have been, I wonder where we're at if Tennessee doesn't just bounce back and then proceed to take the first couple big hits from Vanderbilt and get that game back on track. But I say that all I bring that all back to say, I think Florida will be the same situation, where I think Tennessee will at worst have 2 losses, and they know going into year 5 here and everything else, like they will be in the college football playoff if they just simply win this game in November, and you're in. And I think Tennessee has handled that a lot better this past year, and I think this is a very well-coached football team now. I think they've learned, they've gone through a lot of those early growing pains with success. I think they handle success a lot better than they did in 2022. So I'd feel better about it. And also just, hey, Tennessee won in the Swamp in December 1st in early 2000. So that was the last time, or one more time since then. What was it? Was it 2003? What was the last time
that we won down there?
Yeah. Would it be 2003?
Shit. It's been a while, brother. I think I would go back to that. What was that year Dobbs was down there and we had it 4th and whatever, and Callaway goes down the sideline. Was it Callaway? Maybe I remember which.
I think it was Callaway.
Yeah, that
it was 2003 was the last time we won in Gainesville.
So you think about all the times you should have won, and we should have won 2 years ago. I mean, it was a joke that we didn't. That's why I made the bet on our show that if Florida won, I'd do a mile for every point they beat us by, and they beat us by 13 damn points. And it was almost more than that. I was at the end, even though it was a moot point, I was ready for him just to kick field goal, knock 3 miles off my walk the next day. But yeah, that's it stuck with me. And after that, brother, I am not betting on that football game, especially down in the Swamp. But this is a year. And what's intriguing about that one is it's late. We're so used to playing that one early, having it late in the year. I don't think it's been this late since 2001 when we went down there. And that was a great game. But I do think that this is a good opportunity, and the wheels may be coming off for Florida. I feel like the Boo Birds will be out, especially if they've got a tough schedule. And if they lose 3 or 4 games before ours, there may be, we may be talking coach swaps down there. And I think that's exactly what Tennessee would need.
100%. And I even said, I was like, Graham Mertz scares me more than TJ Lagway against Tennessee. Those kind of quarterbacks crush Tennessee in the bank style. It's the Will Howards, the Graham Mertz, the ones who can just sit there and they're like, we're attacking you 5-yard wheel routes, 5-yard outs, and we're just going to stab you in these very little bits at a time. And you're like, we can't get off the field. It's those kind of games where the Arkansas game was one of the most agonizing, frustrating, that opening, like that's what that is. That was the special. Like that's how you do it. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, to Tennessee's credit, but when it does, like it's the grammar where people are like, oh, Lagway, if he had a full game, I'm like, Tennessee's beating, I think, Florida more comfortably if Lagway plays the full game, because I think Graham Mertz was cooking. Graham Mertz was comfortable.
Graham Mertz would have won that game. I believe it. And DJ, I mean, DJ at the end of the season was obviously a lot different than he was at the start of the season, but he's a really good kid, and they've got a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. And that was it's a sneaky good team. So it's one of those that I do think momentum is going to be important. They're either on the good side or the bad side. And, not a lot of Florida listeners on this podcast, so I'll just tell you, I'm thinking it's the bad side. This may be a team that struggles to get 7 wins.
But I'm here for it, because I think they're going to be.
Hell yeah.
I love, like, the Florida Auburn developments this year is must see. I'm so glad I'm not a fan of either of those two teams, because it's all or nothing. I mean, Napier and Freeze, it's all or nothing this year. They so big in the portal. They have all this offseason hype. And then you look at the schedule and you're like, oh, Jackson Arnold's under. You're basing it all on Jackson Arnold. You were there when Tennessee I mean, Tennessee's the reason Jackson Arnold was not a starter for the rest of the season. Like, that was what Tennessee did in that game to just, I mean, Jackson Arnold imploded under pressure.
Yeah,
from
I
UT.
was at the Missouri-Oklahoma game when he basically gift wrapped him a score there at the end.
Yeah.
So, I'm intrigued. That's going to be a team that looks totally different next year. I think LSU's another team. It's going to look totally different next season. And I think some are going to be good, and I think some are going to take, like, the hot one right now is Oklahoma with Mateer and bringing him in, extremely mobile quarterback. And, I think he could be a good thing, but again, you're replacing coordinators. Your offensive line still looks like garbage. So I'm glad Tennessee's got them pretty early, because I do think that, and at home, that's also going to help. So I love our schedule. I think Tennessee's teed up very nicely. And if they're not talking about us now, by God, they will in November.
They're just such a safer bet than so many other teams that people are talking into, but they just don't want to do it. I'm like, Tennessee's lost one home game in 3 years.
Yeah.
They're a safe bet.
It was the one I was at. So
same.
The game I went to the last time before that was the Ole Miss Tennessee game where
all right, you can't be going any more games.
No,
Shane. Sorry,
you're
out.
I'm done. I almost feel like it's not good, but I do want to see another Tennessee game because I do love getting over there. But yeah, we're going to try to do a couple more games this year, and I haven't quite narrowed it down. We did South Carolina, LSU, Missouri, Oklahoma. But this year I would love to see Tennessee, Georgia again, but I don't know. I'm bad luck, so maybe I don't go. Dolly Parton couldn't even sing in that game I was at. That's how bad it was.
That's an all-timer. That's a great, like, you had to be there situation. You had to be there, because I don't think on the broadcast, I watched it back. Like, you have no idea what that was like unless you were in the building.
It's a shit show. Absolute shit show, man. Yeah,
Goodness
somebody
gracious.
got fired. Somebody got fired after that one.
Cousin Shane, what can the good folks check out from you and Mike over there at that SEC podcast this week?
Yeah, so we're working on a few things. Big Cuz Does is something we've been rolling out. I went to Universal Park, did a couple of drinks around the Universal, so be sure to check out that on YouTube. But me and Mike, we're there every day, usually about 7 o'clock, just talking all things SEC football. Dabble a little bit in basketball, but not enough to know anything. But appreciate all the support we get over there, and thank you for having me on, Chase.
Absolutely. Keep up the great work, my friend. I love the Rusty Manziel one you did a couple days ago. Yeah. That was a really good interview. So y'all are doing more and more good stuff content-wise, and it's a must-watch each and every day. So SEC fans, Tennessee fans who are tuning into this one, make sure you're subscribed to that SEC podcast if you are not already. Cousin Shane, we'll have to do this again soon.
Hell yeah, man. Anytime, brother.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.